Look at this graph. You've probably seen one of these before. It's a bell curve used to visualize data like the IQ of a population where the vast majority of people fall somewhere here in the middle, and the rest are spread out on the sides where we have exceptional ability and exceptional disability. Interestingly though, not just in IQ, but in pretty much everything. And I've slowly come to realize that for each new thing I pursue, there's a bell curve just like this one, in one way, shape, or form. And that bell curve reveals where you are and what you need to do to be in the exceptionally well bracket in that given field. And here's the thing, it's far less than you probably think it is. Let me show you. Here's the bell curve for marathon finishers. It looks a whole lot similar to the IQ bell curve, except for a few spikes near the various time cutoffs, which makes sense, as a lot of people are targeting marathons in something amount of hours, so don't get caught up on that. The point still stands. The faster the finishing time, the fewer people. But what's fascinating here is what's not on the graph. You see, we have no clue how hard any of these people have worked before they got to the race day. As in, we have no idea how many kilometers they ran per week in the months leading up to the race. If we knew that, we could figure out how much hard work you would need to do to be in your desired time bracket, at least on average. This goes for any field, so it's important when you find this bell curve that you also plot in the work it took to get to the right side of the curve. Luckily, I found this data. So in the example of male marathon finishers, to be average, you need to finish in about 4 to 4.5 hours, which would require 12 weeks of 18 miles or 29 kilometers per week split across 3 runs on average. And if you're a runner like myself, you would know this really isn't that much. Let's not forget, these people are marathon finishers, not marathon participators or simply the average male in a random population. These people have most likely raced before and take running seriously. Yet, to be average in this pretty extreme human feat, you need to only commit to this pretty low weekly mileage. But this video is about how to do exceptionally well. So let me show you how quickly this scales and how quickly you will leave pretty much everyone in the dust. Okay, so do you see this little area in the left corner here? This is the sub 3 hour crowd. That's what I would say is exceptional ability in the marathon, considering so few people ever reach it. So to get here, it's 12 weeks of 42 miles or 67 kilometers per week over 7 runs on average. This means to be exceptionally good in the marathon, one of the toughest human challenges that we partake in, you're simply running a little more than twice the distance than the average marathoner, which is already an insane human feat. You're doing the same thing, same distance per run even. The only difference is you show up on more days than the average marathoner. Obviously, there are a few more nuances to this, like the intensity you run each run at and the fact you've most likely been running for more than 12 weeks prior to this, and so on. But at its core, the point still stands. The more you show up, the more work you do, the more exceptional you become. And while it might sound ridiculous to you to run every single day for 12 weeks straight, let me preface it by saying this. If you can show up to your job, which you may not even like, every day for 8 hours a day, then maybe it's not so difficult or crazy being consistent about something that literally would only take 1 hour of your day to then in turn be exceptionally good at the extreme human feat that is the marathon. But listen, this video isn't about running or IQs, it's about the relative ease of getting to the top in any field, and when we dig deeper, it's not about talent, it's always a question of how many times you show up, the consistency and how long of a time frame you do this on that determines your place on this bell curve. So how do we get this consistency? How do we show up time and time again? Well, if you want to be consistent in your pursuits, the whole idea is that you lower your expectations as much as you need to the point you actually do the task. So if you're a scriptwriter, for example, and you get a new gig and you need to write a 10-page paper, then what you would do is you would figure out what the minimum amount of words, sentences, pages, or simply paragraphs that you can complete on any given day where you're certain you will show up and do the task, which is really hard to figure out because who knows how many words you can write in any given day? Only you will know through extensive trial and error. So you could start out by setting a goal of 1 page per day, and if you find yourself resisting the task and not starting, well, then the task is too big, at this current moment at least. So you lower it to 1 paragraph per day, and if that still doesn't work, You reduce the task until it does. Don't worry if you're starting out by only being able to complete a few sentences per day. That's not important. What is important is that you remain consistent. You need to show up every single day, and by doing so, you're slowly but surely outworking everyone else. Because over time, you'll get better at script writing, better at running, and you'll be able to write more and run further in the same time frame than when you started and everyone else. You see, the best runners don't run for longer durations than I do. They run further than I do. We spend the same amount of time on our individual runs for the most part, yet they get more out of that time because of years of consistency. And what's interesting is that if you accomplish something really extraordinary like finishing a marathon in under 3 hours, people think it was tougher for you to complete that marathon than for someone who ran it in 5 hours. But that's not true. It was easier for the guy running it in 3 hours, as he spent less time running and probably didn't have to constantly stop and force himself to get going again, which requires immense mental toughness. The difference lies in the preparation. The guy who finished in under 3 hours worked harder prior to the marathon to have an easier time at the marathon, and the guy who did it in 5 hours worked less hard prior to the marathon to then have an extremely hard time at the marathon. It's kind of like a piggy bank. Someone who's great at saving and puts in money every single day has enough cushioning for an unexpected expense and can easily pay it. In contrast, someone who doesn't save gets a real wake-up call when their car breaks down and they don't have the means to get it fixed, which brings me back to consistency and the role motivation plays in achieving exceptional ability. Let me put it this way. Motivation is probably the single worst thing you can rely on for achieving long-term success. Motivation is this arbitrary thing. It blows like the wind, comes and goes, and it's just as unreliable as the men's room hands-free soap dispensers. You can't count on those, and you can't count on motivation either. Waiting for motivation to do anything is a recipe for mediocrity. Building consistency is a recipe for mastery. Explained perfectly by Robert Greene, the author of Mastery, in the following quote: "The time that leads to mastery is dependent on the intensity of our focus." Greene explains that time and effort inevitably yield mastery, or as we refer to it in this video, exceptional ability. But if you're a human, you've probably encountered a feeling of resistance, a feeling that comes along anytime you're confronted with something hard to do, like the 10-page paper we discussed earlier. This is where arbitrary deadlines come into play. You see, there are no deadlines in your own pursuits. There's no boss to tell you it needs to be handed in by Friday morning, and no school to tell you to upload it at 12 AM on Wednesday. Therefore, there's no immediate consequence of not doing it. The consequence lies much further down the road, when you're on your deathbed wishing you had done it. So we need to put in place arbitrary deadlines, constantly forcing us past the limits our own minds have created, developing a standard of excellence unmatched by others. But pushing past your preconceived limits means you will fail again and again before you ever see any amount of progress. You need to see through these failures and realize that they are the very building blocks of progress. No one achieves exceptional ability with a perfect track record. You need failure, expect it, cherish it, and most importantly, learn from it. So that's it if you want exceptional ability in anything. Follow the principles of this video, and if no one else does, know that the only person who needs to believe in you is you.